British Columbia, mountains, ocean, skiing, rivers, Ryan Reynolds, and complete political chaos. I had made a video script about the state of BC politics and their upcoming election, but in all honesty, I had to completely delete it and restart. I will be making a separate video about the BC election and what the parties are proposing soon once we have platforms, but for now, I just need to tell the story of the last few years of BC politics because it's just insane. BC politics has been dominated by three parties in the last few years: the BC Liberal Party, the BC NDP, and the BC Greens. The BC NDP won a majority in 2020 after they first came to power in 2017 in a coalition government with the Green Party, ending 16 years of BC Liberal rule. The Premier who won the election in 2020, John Horgan, subsequently resigned as Premier and is leader of the BC NDP after his fight with cancer, which sadly returned in 2024, and said he could not commit to being able to run the party through another election. A leadership race ensued, and after the only other candidate for the BC NDP leadership was disqualified, David Eby was acclaimed leader of the BC NDP and appointed as Premier of BC. Eby took office in 2022 and has faced many challenges on numerous fronts. This includes his government's decision to decriminalize hard drugs in BC, which led to a spike in overdoses and addictions, and subsequently the end of this pilot project. Combined with cost of living concerns, among other things, Eby has faced numerous issues. This was also combined with an increase of distaste towards the federal government of Trudeau. As Eby is the Premier in Canada who is the most ideologically connected to Trudeau, because of this, he got tied to Trudeau quite a bit as this happened. Despite this, his party has remained between 40 and 47% in most polls. As this was going on, a separate fire was happening on the right in BC. The main party that BC voters on the right had been supporting was the BC Liberal Party, which has been the party for voters on the right of the political spectrum, despite being a quite centrist party in nature. They have tried to disassociate from the Liberals under Trudeau, especially as he becomes as unpopular as he is now. To finalize this distance, newly elected leader Kevin Falcon was elected with the promise of renaming the party. On April 12, 2023, the BC Liberal Party was officially renamed to the BC United Party. No, this was not a soccer team name, but the former natural governing party of BC. However, this rebrand did not go well. Many voters and surveys just didn't know who BC United was, and this led to a downturn in support for the party. However, in my opinion, this was not the mistake that ended the party. On August 18, 2023, Kevin Falcon removed John Rustad, a former cabinet minister, for retweeting posts that stated that carbon dioxide emissions did not contribute to climate change, and this removal also happened to be on John Rustad's birthday. This forced him to sit as an independent. However, much speculation grew after he decided to campaign for a guy named Harman Bengu in the Surrey South by-election. He was running for the BC Conservatives, a party which had not won any seats since 1979. However, this guy managed to win 12% of the vote in the by-election, which might sound unimpressive, but to think that this came from not even having a candidate in the previous election, the strong BC Liberal candidate in Eleanor Sturko, more on her later. This was considered a win for the party, and Rustad from here faced many calls to officially join the BC Conservatives. And in February of 2023, he did just that and gave the party representation in the legislature. Shortly after this, the leader of the party stepped down, and Rustad was the only candidate to run to replace him, and was thus acclaimed as the new BC Conservative leader. He had another by-election shortly after this in John Horgan's old riding, in which the BC Conservatives finished second with just under 20% of the vote, ahead of John Rustad's old party, BC United. As summer came along in BC, so did a new wave of support for the BC Conservative Party, who steadily climbed in support in the polls and eventually overtook BC United in support. Initially, out of fear of a vote split which could result in an Eby supermajority, both sides tried to initiate merger talks. But as the BC Conservatives surged in support, neither side could come to an agreement. These merger talks ended. During this, Bruce Banman, an MLA elected as a BC Liberal, left the party to join the BC Conservatives, which gave them 2 seats in official party status. Things kind of stayed in this state for a few months as the polls changed and the BC Conservatives ended up being ahead of the NDP in a few polls. The BC Conservatives also had 3 major wins, as 3 different BCU MLAs, crossed the floor to join John Rustad's Conservatives. This included BCU caucus chair
Lauren
Dirksen, former RCMP spokeswoman and candidate in the previously mentioned by-election Eleanor Sturko, who made a name for herself by being particularly active in the discussion about drugs and addictions, and Teresa Watt. As this was happening, numerous BCU MLAs announced they weren't running again, to the point where over half of the MLAs elected in 2020 were either running for the BC Conservatives or not running at all. And the BC Conservatives also courted some well-known candidates from the BC United Party, as well as some former candidates from the NDP too. The BC United Party made some last-ditch efforts to try and salvage the party, proposing sweeping tax cuts and policies on drugs and cost of living. Additionally, he tried to label John Rustad as too far right for comfort and pointed out the former political allegiances and political opinions of some BC Conservative candidates. In the end, this ended up being in vain. Just last week, Kevin Falcon announced that BCU was no longer running candidates in the general election, and instead some of their candidates would be joining the BC Conservative Party. We don't know all of the details on whether some candidates will try and run with BC United or if they will try and revive the party. But overall, this is an insane saga in BC politics. There's a few more MLAs that have announced they're not running again, and some are making independent bids, and BCU is suggesting that they will run a few candidates just to maintain registration as a party, because they aren't dissolving, they just aren't running any candidates in this election. But imagine being Kevin Falcon in this video. Kicking this guy out of your caucus just for him to overtake your party in the polls, and you drop out of the election just to support him. This BC election is now officially a two-horse race between the NDP and BC Conservatives, and in all honesty, it could go either way. Obviously, the BC Conservatives need to make sure that they remain on course for victory and no major issues come up, but I would rather be the BC Conservatives as of right now than the BC NDP. Could a party that hasn't won any seats since 1979 win an election outright and make John Rustad premier? Let me know in the comments, but I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, as that helps me out a lot. But apart from that, have a good rest of your day and see you.